Assalamu alaikum. Good day, and a very good day, and a very good morning if you are seeing it in the morning, which you will be not be doing so. I can understand it could be at your leisure or availability of the facilities to listen to it. We will talk today about the intellectualization of American society and intellectual and cultural trends towards the end of 19th century. Industrialization altered the way Americans thought, and at the same time it transformed their ways of making a living. And that really gave them a time and a space to think, talk, express the finer things in life. As society became more complex, higher education became more important, and Americans began to make significant contributions both in the hard sciences, as they said, and such as chemistry and physics, and relatively new soft sciences, which we today call social sciences, such as psychology, political science, and sociology. History joined this group a little later. It could be comparable to Renaissance of 1840s and 1850s, and it occurred here in 1817 and 1880s. By the end of the century, America had finally emerged intellectually from the shadow of Europe. It was only possible because of knowledge revolution. The improvements in public education and the needs of increasing complex society for every type of intellectual skill caused a veritable revolution in how knowledge was discovered, disseminated, and put to use. They observed the effects of formal education in their children, and many older people were eager to experience some of its benefits. By 1900, there were about 200 organizations that supported intellectual standards in their programs, and in general they were low, for they reflected the prevailing taste of American people: diverse, enthusiastic, uncritical, and shallow. But these movements provided a chance to grow, to think deep, and thousands were seeking that kind of intellectual stimulation, which they got and they improved upon. Newspapers were an even more important means of disseminating information and educating masses. And the new technologies supplied the major incentive for change. The web press, which printed simultaneously on both sides of paper, fed it into large rolls, and then the linotype machine, which cast rows of type as needed directly from molten metal, cut printing costs dramatically. So you see, if we improve in technology, as is obvious today, for a person like me who is technologically almost ignorant, can communicate to you through this great technology that we have now. Population growth and better education created an ever larger demand for printed matter. It's very interesting to note that European and American societies still read the books. The publishers were a little conservative, but reaching the masses meant lowering intellectual and cultural standards, appealing to emotions, and adopting popular, sometimes radical causes. But the Pulitzer achieved this brilliant success by casting wide net. To the masses, he offered bold black headlines devoted to crime. And you know how crime attracts our attention. Together with feature stories, political cartoons, sports pages, comics, and pictures. And for the educated and the affluent, he provided better political and financial coverage than the most respectable New York journals. And then came magazine journalism. Growth and ferment created a new magazine world. New magazines such as the Forum 1886 and the Arena in 1889 emphasize hard-hitting articles on controversial subjects by leading experts. I must say that these magazines started a dialogue in the society, and a dialogue is always a convenient way to understand others, rather pitched against each other. Bach was another person, and among many competitors reached millions of readers. Like Pulitzer in the newspaper field, they found ways of interesting rich and poor, the cultivated and the ignorant. Under Bach, the journal, it was named a journal, reached a circulation of 2 million. And then college and universities. America realized very early that higher education was the basic thing for transforming a society. More significant than the expansion of the colleges were the alteration in their curricula and atmosphere permeating the average campus. Or you can compare it. You can compare it how they saw the curriculum basis for the change, because if curriculums are stale or out of touch with the realities, they will not make a difference in young minds. In the forefront reform was Harvard, the oldest and most prestigious college in country. In 1860s, it possessed an excellent faculty, but teaching methods were antique, and the curriculum had remained almost unchanged since the colonial period. So Harvard chose to be a place to which a young man is sent, to a university, a place to which he goes. So now you see the difference, a place where he's sent and a place where he goes. So volition, ambition, involvement, interest comes in education. And the most important development in higher education was the founding of Johns Hopkins in 1876. This university was one of many established in the period of wealthy industrialists. Its benefactor, Baltimore merchant Johns Hopkins, had made his fortune in Baltimore and Ohio railroads. See how he was returning the debt of gratitude to his own people by expanding best education system. Johns Hopkins specialized in graduate education, and the example of Johns Hopkins encouraged other wealthy individuals to endow universities offering advanced work. So by 19th century, America has realized the importance of higher education, and it will make them to realize that the young mind should be put to serious thinking so that they can make a change in life. The land-grant universities adopted new ideas quickly. They were co-educational from the start in most developed professional schools and experimented with extension work and summer programs. And very important advances were made in women's education. Beginning with Vassar College, with opened its door to 300 women students in 1865, the opportunity for young women to pursue academic work and seriously gradually expanded. Wellesley and Smith, both founded in 1875, completed the so-called Big Three women colleges. And together with the already established Mount Holyoke, Bryn Mawr, Barnard and Radcliffe, they became known as the Seven Sisters. And interestingly, when universities grew bigger, their administration became more complicated and the prestige of an administrator rose inordinately. Higher education reflected American values with all their strengths and weaknesses. A complex society required a more professional and specialized education for its youth. The coarseness and the rampant materialism and competitiveness of the era inevitably found expression in the college and universities. And then scientific advances were made. And in pure sciences, America produced a number of outstanding figures in these years. The giant among them were whose contribution, some extent rang with those of Newton, Darwin, and Einstein, was Josiah Willard Gibbs, professor of mathematical physics at Yale's. Purely theoretical at the time, Gibbs' ideas led to vital advances in metallurgy and in the manufacture of plastic, drugs, and other producers. And then came the revolution in social sciences. Close connection existed between the practical issue of the age and achievements of the leading thinkers. So the application of the theory of evolution to every aspect of human relation, the impact of industrialization on society, the development of institutions and their interaction, such topics were of intense concern to American social scientists. Controversies over trusts, slum condition, and other problems drew scholars of their towers into practical affairs. This was really the desirability of any particular state action of the latter type was simply a matter of expediency. Then there was progressive education. Traditionally, American teachers had emphasized the 3 R's and relied on it very strictly. But at the same time, there were evolutionists among them who were pressing for a kind of education that would help children to survive by adapting to the demands of their environment. And as the famous philosopher who summarized and gave direction to these forces was John Dewey, a professor at the University of Chicago. And Dewey's approach was ethical. Were the nation's youth being properly prepared for the task it faced in the modern world? I wish we can ask the same question on a more general basis, while some of these institutions are catering to this. Law and history became 2 disciplines of interest because they felt that it was very important to investigate the evolution of institutions, and it encouraged historians to study social and economics as well as purely political subjects. Then realism came in literature, and we can never forget Mark Twain, William Dean Howells. Howells had a real good social conscience. Gradually, he became aware of the problems that industrialization has created. And Mark Twain, he wrote closest to American heart. His greatness lies from his observation, and the key point to his literature was his very intense observation. In Huckleberry Finn, his masterpiece, his portrait of the slave Jim, loyal, patient, naive, yet withal a man, is unforgettable. Twain's achievement is magnificent, rough and uneven like the man himself. His works catch more of the spirit of the age he named than those of any other writer. Then Henry James comes in this, and the Bostonians was a complicated and psychologically sensitive study of the varieties of female behavior in seemingly uniform social situations. So he touched a very serious civic question. Realism in art came, and in the beginning it was not something comparable to European art, but later the American artists make their own signatures on the world map. The pragmatic approach that America had and has, they saw that the evolution posed an immediate change to religion. If Darwin was correct, the biblical account of the creation was untrue, and the idea that man had been formed in God's image was highly unlikely. So, evolution did not undermine the faith of any large percentage of the population, and the effects of Darwinianism on philosophy were less dramatic, but in the end more significant. The Peirce, a rigorous logician, but more rigorous than him was William James, brother of the novelist James, one of the most remarkable American of his generations. And we must remember that this pragmatism brought Americans face to face with somber problems, although relatively made them optimistic. It bred insecurity, for there could be no certainty, no confirming reliance on any eternal value. And pragmatism seemed to suggest that the end justified the means. The people of the new century found pragmatism a heady wine. They would quaff it freely, enthusiastically, down to the bitter dregs.